When you call a thing good, are you reaching past its existence to something even deeper? Or are you just saying that something that is there is also desirable? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Channel summary of the Summa Theologica. Now, we are in Prima Pars, question 5, article 2. In the last article, article 1, we looked at the question of whether being and goodness were the same thing, and Aquinas says they are, they're just different in idea. He says goodness is just what all things desire. It's just desirability. A thing is desirable insofar as it is perfect. A thing is perfect insofar as it is actual. And a thing is actual because it is made so by its existence. So to be good is just to be. With the extra note that goodness indicates the desirability of the thing, whereas being does not. Now hold on to that closing line because that sets up our whole question for today. If good and being are the same in reality, but just different in idea, which one gets to the mind first? Which one comes in priority in idea? Or priority in thought? That's article 2. That's what article 2 is all about. And Aquinas says that it's got to be being. He quotes what he thinks is Aristotle. It's not actually Aristotle. It's a Neoplatonic work drawn from a guy named Proclus. But it says the first of created things is being. So he concludes being stands at the head of the order and goodness cannot be prior to what comes first. Now, here's his argument. First, the meaning signified by the name of the thing is that which the mind conceives of the thing and intends by the word that stands for it. So we start with what the word's meaning even is. A name doesn't point straight at the thing. It points to the thing as the mind has grasped it. So the question, which is prior in idea, quietly relocates from reality to the order of conception. Which concept does the intellect form first? And therefore his conclusion, that is prior in idea which was first conceived by the intellect. So prior in idea means prior in conceiving, not temporal priority, not priority in ontological dependence or something like that. It's just whichever notion hits the mind first wins. Everything is knowable in as much as it is in actuality. That is, a thing is only intelligible insofar as it is an act, insofar as it is existing. So the first thing conceived by the intellect is being. So being is the proper object of the intellect. And he gives an analogy here. As sound is that which is primarily audible. Being is to the mind what sound is to the ear. It's the proper object, the thing it's built to catch first and most generally. Your ear doesn't reach loud or musical until it catches just sound first in general. In the same way, your mind doesn't catch anything unless it catches being first. And he concludes, therefore, in idea, being is prior to goodness. All right, let's look at some objections now. Objection 1. Names are arranged according to the arrangement of the things signified by the names. In other words, our order of words mirrors the order of things themselves. So how we rank our names will be indicative of how we should rank reality. But then he goes on to say that Dionysius, in the divine names, assigned the first place in the names of God to his goodness rather than his being. Therefore, in idea, goodness is prior to being. All right, his response. First, we have to see what Dionysius is actually doing here. He says Dionysius is discussing the divine names as implying some causal relation to God in this passage. For we name God from creatures, he says, as a cause from its effects. You know, we don't have direct access to God. What we have direct access to is the stuff he made. So we can look at all this stuff and we have to name him from using the stuff that he made. So the divine names are really just God's causality. And that reframes the ranking. We're no longer ranking just bare concepts. Now we're ranking God's causal roles. Now, goodness has the aspect of desirability, and this implies the idea of a final cause. And by final cause, we're talking about Aristotelian final cause, we're talking about some goal or end. Now, an agent does not act except for some end, and by an agent, matter is moved to its form. So final causality is the first amongst causes. And the idea here is that good names God as the final cause. That is the end or the goal, the for the sake of which. And the final cause is primary amongst the causes because nothing happens unless we have some kind of goal or end that is going to bring us to do something. The agent only acts for an end, and only then shapes matter to form. And as an analogy, you could think that a builder doesn't lift the hammer until there is a house to aim at. Hence, he says, the end is called the cause of causes. Thus, goodness as a cause is prior to being, as is the end to the form. Therefore, among the names signifying the divine causality, goodness precedes being. So it's not in the concepts, it's in the causality. And then he goes in and talks about the Platonists. He says, goodness is more extensively participated in than being. For primary matter participates in goodness as tending to it, but it does not participate in being since it's presumed to be non-being. So Platonists wrongly call prime matter non-being. They don't separate raw matter from privation, from the lack of something. But Aquinas is saying that even still on this view, on their mistaken view, matter still tends towards the good, because everything seeks its like, while supposedly lacking being. So goodness here could be said to reach further than being. And he says, therefore Dionysius says that goodness extends to non-existence. And that's all that weird phrase means. It's a way of speaking that follows the Platonist picture. It's not that goodness is prior in thought. So even on the Platonist picture, the conclusion still doesn't follow. All right, objection 2. That which is more extensive is prior in idea. And you could think like animal is prior in idea to dog, because animal stretches further. And then again, Dionysius, goodness extends to things both existing and not existing, whereas existence extends to existing things alone. So goodness is more extensive than being, right? We could talk about things that are good that don't exist, like unicorns or something. Whereas we can't talk about the existence of unicorns, right? They don't actually exist, but we could still say that they're good. Therefore, the objection goes, goodness is prior in idea to being. Then, as a reply, he says that goodness extends to existing and non-existing things, not so far as it can be predicated of them, but so far as it can cause them. So you can't truly call a thing that isn't there good. Instead, when we say a thing is good, we're saying that there's something that is being reached towards, that the non-existent thing is reaching towards this goodness. You know, as some kind of goal that it wants to accomplish, that it doesn't exist, but it wants to exist. And then by non-existence, we don't just understand those things that do not be, but those things which are potential and not actual. So in this case, non-existence here does not mean nothing. It means a potential to be a particular thing, but you're not that thing yet. So the acorn isn't yet an oak tree, but it has the potential to be an oak tree. For goodness, he says, has the aspect of the end, in which not only actual things have their completion, but towards which tend even those things which are not actual, but merely potential. So that's why the good can reach the merely potential as an end, as a goal. Then he says, now being implies a habitude of a formal cause only, and its causality does not extend save to those things which are actual. So being, in contrast, works as the form. You know, when we have those four causes, matter, form, final cause, and efficient cause, being would be the form of the thing. It makes the thing to be the actual way that it is. So the difference in reach here is just a final cause versus a formal cause. It's not a hierarchy in idea. Being still gets conceived first. Okay, objection 3. What is the most universal is prior in idea. The thing that is the most far-reaching, right, comes first in your idea. Goodness, it seems, is more universal than being. Now, goodness has the aspect of desirability, whereas to some, non-existence is desirable, and he uses as his example here, or as his support here, a biblical passage, Matthew 26:24, where Jesus says that it would be better if Judas had never been born. So goodness seems to be more universal than being. So in idea, goodness must be prior to being. His reply here is very interesting because this is a hard case. Can it really be said that it would be better for Judas than just never to have existed? Well, kind of yes and no. It would be relatively better, he says, but not desirable of itself. It's desirable in as much as evil is desirable to be taken away, and it can only be taken away by non-being. So nobody wanting Judas to be removed from existence is wanting nothingness, right? That doesn't make any sense. What they're wanting is the removal of an evil. And it just happens to be the case that non-being is the only thing that will remove that. Now, the removal of an evil cannot be desirable, except so far as the evil removes a thing of some being. So why is removing evil desirable? Because evil itself is a deprivation of being. It is the lack of some good. You have a thing and it should be a particular way. And if it's not that way, if it lacks some of that way, then that's the evil. That is an absence of good, a privation of good. So in this case, even reaching for non-being, what you're really after is some mode of being that you can't bear to see be destroyed. Therefore, he says being is desirable of itself and non-being only relatively. Thus, even non-being can be spoken of as relatively good. So then non-being is only good in this qualified way, in this relative way, so doesn't count. Objection 4. Not only is existence desirable, but life, knowledge, and many other things besides. Thus, it seems that existence is a particular habitable, a particular thing that is good, and goodness is a universal habitable, just desirability itself. Therefore, absolutely, goodness is prior in idea to being. His response, when you talk about those other things like life and wisdom and those kinds of things, those are only desirable insofar as they are actual, insofar as they be. Hence, in each one of them, some kind of being is desired. And so nothing can be desired except being. And consequently, nothing is good except being. So there is no desirable that isn't just a mode of being. Being isn't one appetible thing amongst many. It's what every appetible thing turns out to be made of. Good rides on being, not above it. Okay, we've now fixed the order. First comes being, then comes the goodness in idea, which sets a trap that Aquinas walks straight into in the next article. If good is just being seen as desirable, does that justify the sweeping converse? Is every being just insofar as it exists good? Article 3 will ask exactly that question. And the objections are brutal. What about evil? Isn't that a being? What about prime matter, which is barely anything? And if you don't know what prime matter is, I'll explain it in the next article. What about the objects of mathematics, where the philosopher, meaning Aristotle, says goodness doesn't even show up? Aquinas' answer? Every being is good. Make sure to subscribe and get those notifications for next time to see how he survives those objections. Also like and comment. Adios.